Hello, thank you for joining us for When, How, and the Why of Press Releases with Mickie Kennedy. Have you ever wondered why you need a press release? I know a lot of people ask me that question. Moreover, what to write in it or even how to send it out. Most people can build their own PR campaigns for under $2,000, and not everyone has the money to spend to pay for an agency, which is why we're doing this summit here. PR professionals have held the keys of PR distribution for a while. So in this conversation, I want to kind of unlock and unfold the mysteries of press releases and press release distribution. And we'll go through the dynamics of how to pull together a winning press release and how to distribute to the top outlets and reach editors. Today, I'm speaking with Mickie Kennedy, the founder of eReleases and a leading PR expert, press release ninja, and media relations networker. Mickie Kennedy started the company eReleases 20 years ago after working in a PR environment that was not meeting the needs of small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses. He struck out on his own to build a company that would give smaller firms access to the newswire with a personal touch. And we at the Silver Telegram have been using eReleases probably for the last decade. So it's very exciting to have him here today. Welcome, Mickie. Thank you so much for joining us at the PR Essentials Summit.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here, and really looking forward to talking a little bit about press releases, which is something that I don't get to do very often, especially uh, lately with the social environment being what it is. But I love talking about press releases, and I'm very passionate about it.
Good, good, good. I think there's going to be a lot of good questions about why, if we should still be doing them as well.
Right.
I know, we've worked together for a while now, and you've really made press releases more accessible to small business owners, entrepreneurs, startups. I know when I go into a press release discussion with a lot of the companies that we work with, which is startups primarily, they're like, oh, well, it's too expensive. And so I always introduce them to eReleases and talk about the digital distribution. So before we go into the distribution side of things, though, I really want to talk a little bit more about press release development and how effective you believe them to be today, because I also get that question a lot. Are press releases still a thing? It's like the undying question that happens these days.
Right.
So what do you think? What's your kind of first opinion on, is the press release still relevant? I think I know your answer, but why, I guess, would be the question.
Right. I think that press releases are still as effective today as they were, 20 years ago when I started. We were sending out newsworthy press releases then. I was working for a firm in DC, and we would get pickup and without any pitching or anything.
Mhm.
And so I knew that getting that out there to journalists directly could result in media pickup. And we always didn't know what release was going to do well or not, but
Right.
we did it as a baseline for all of our clients. We would get a release out there. At the time, we were faxing. So this was about 25, 24 years ago.
Okay.
And I was pretty low on the totem pole. So I was the guy who pre-programmed numbers into the fax machine
Oh, wow.
whenever we were doing a send. And we would get a lot of calls from people who would say, I just received this. There's a lot of data points in it. Could you just email it over to us?
Mhm.
And that's when the light bulb went off on my head, and I was like, email press releases, e-releases. So I started building e-releases as basically a email platform to distribute releases to the media, and we still do that to this day. But we're mostly known for the value that we give through the partnership with PR Newswire and sending over the newswire. That being said, I had a release that went out earlier this year. And again, when I looked at it, I knew it was extremely newsworthy and it would
Mhm.
do really well. And it got picked up in over 100 different places, including like the Wall Street Journal, CNN, Bloomberg. And it's because it was very newsworthy. And so
Mhm.
sometimes when you have a newsworthy press release or announcement, using a press release to get it out there gives you a huge baseline, because if you had sat and reached out to these 100 publications, you would just use 2 or 3 weeks of your time, and all of that was saved by just getting it out there to them. That being said, sometimes you have to take that release and go above and beyond and do individual pitching and other approaches to sort of get your message across to the media and to sort of build that opportunity that might be there.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is really interesting too. It's like, one of the questions is, do I have to also do the news wire? And I often recommend both. I recommend the news wire and then us also pitching our targeted list of people. What do you think, like, so can you give us a little bit of insight, and maybe this is kind of off script a little bit, but a little bit of insight on how, when you are distributing through PR Newswire, how can you explain how the editors and the writers receive that news, and why they're getting it versus like maybe just an email?
Sure. So it has changed a bit over the years. I think when we first started working with the news wires, it was mostly transmitted directly through an intranet into the terminals that each journalist had there, and they would look at the different branches of the wire. Like if you covered fashion, you would do, you would see the fashion feed,
Mhm.
and it got sophisticated over time where it could actually collect or capture releases that had certain parameters, like include ready to wear or exclude ready to wear in fashion,
Gotcha.
for example, and things like that. So it started to capture the releases that were probably more likely of interest to that journalist. That's changed with the web, so a lot of them are getting it through the web. They have a custom login. I think there's PR Newswire for Journalists is one of those things, and it
Okay.
does the same thing. It captures by keyword, inclusions, exclusions, so you can really narrow down to the types of stuff that a journalist covers, and those are the type of opportunities. The newswires love to still mention that some of their stuff is through satellite broadcast and all this technological stuff, but basically with the internet, it's basically transmitted electronically,
Yeah.
and because it's on the newswire, it's a trusted source. They know there's a level of vetting that goes, through with that, and that there are certain standards like generally a press contact and things like that. So it makes it pretty easy for journalists to winnow down what they're looking for and to look there first.
Yeah.
They're always going to get stuff through email. They're always going to get phone pitches as well and things like that. But it's tried and true that the newswire is a great source of content, and it's there for journalists to take advantage of.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I think that's exactly the right explanation. So, let's go into maybe a little bit of the anatomy of a press release. So what do you, and I know you do a lot of like reviewing hundreds of press releases all the time. So,
Right.
what are kind of three, and I know it's hard to do three, so if there's a little bit more, that's fine. But what are three or four best practices when putting together a press release? What do you think that the reporters or the journalists are looking at first? And yeah.
Right. So the headline is the most important. Even the newswire, when it transmits, it's by headline. And whether someone's going to review the release is, what's in the headline. Is it relevant? One of the mistakes that I do see is sometimes people will come up with like New York Post type headlines that are very catchy and intriguing, but they really don't have any they don't provide any context of what the release is about. And so, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. I think a better thing to do is to try to, have something that's interesting and captivating in the headline, but make it contextual so that it's relevant, that who it's for and what it's about. The second most important thing is because these people are busy and reviewing stuff quickly. After the headline, the opening paragraph is really important. It's sort of like the invitation of reading on to the next section of the press release, and using that logic, the first sentence is the most important. So you really want to nail down what it is that you're announcing today. A big mistake that I see a lot of people do is they try to do a press release that announces two or three things, and you really want to focus on an individual release, focusing on one thing. There can be additional things that you bring up in the release that sort of support what that major announcement is, but you really don't want to distract with trying to mean too many different things with your announcement.
Right. No, that's great. I think, yeah, there's so many different things when it comes to headlines. I like the clickbait tip. Definitely, I think I think I went through phases when I first didn't know how to write a press release. And then I thought, oh, clickbait is going to work. And then you realize, oh, well,
Right.
who's really reading this? And I think that's
Right.
another thing that a lot of people missed when we're talking about the newswire. It's not the consumers. Like if you're a consumer company, it's not a consumer who's reading this necessarily, correct?
Right. Correct. It's usually a journalist, and what you're writing it for is for them, and to make it really relevant to them. A lot of people, when they look at a press release, they say this isn't sexy or exciting,
Uh-huh.
and it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be informational. You can elevate it. You can make it really interesting and intriguing. There's a lot that you can do to a press release, but at the end of the day, you're just trying to get facts and information to the journalist and hope that they write the article, and they put their spin on it, and make it relevant for their readers.
Yeah.
And that's a really valuable lesson to know, because so many times people, they feel like they're writing a novel, or it's something that the language isn't there for a press release. And that's a huge mistake.
That's actually
Another.
a really quick,
Go ahead.
really good point. You said writing a novel, and this is not one of the questions I had for you, but what do you think of the ideal length of a press release is?
I think the ideal length is between 400 and 600 words. The answer I used to have is 400 to 500 words, but there are times where the release needs to be longer. Generally, if you have a product that has a lot of features
Mhm.
and you want to get those across because it's going to say tech editors, and they really care about those features and what's included and things like that, it makes sense to make the release a little bit longer. There are disclosures that publicly traded companies have to get out there, so of course those releases can be longer. But most announcements should be, short and sweet and relevant. And it's always a good idea to have links to, a product or service on your website if that's what you're announcing, so they can get some additional information if they need it. But most of the important information should be in the release, and it should be concise. Another thing that I see a lot of people do with press releases is they take quotes for granted.
Mhm.
It's almost like I wrote a press release and like, oh, you don't have a quote in there. And he goes, okay, let me just say one bland sentence
Yeah,
and
yeah,
pack it in and put it in there. And quotes are probably they're one of the secrets that I have for my clients when we write a release. Is it's not unusual for us to pick a story that's kind of interesting and intriguing for a small business, because so many of them can't really compete on product or service, but there's a niche that we try to fill and try to make newsworthy. And so we've seen a lot of times when we send those press releases out, a journalist will jump on it, write about that aspect in their industry, and not include my client in the press release at all. The release was the inspiration for the article, but
uh,
they didn't get included. And so what we found is, if we create a really intriguing and relevant quote that's just really like, wow, that's great, and put it in there, contextually, they're going to want to include it, because if they write a story about that subject and they don't include that quote, it lacks something. And
right.
so the quote is one of the things that saves a lot of stories for our clients, because we're really good at coming up with creative solutions for businesses that just don't stand out. And
I think I think that's a great point. The quote is really important, and I do see that a lot too. Like exactly what you're saying. Oh, we were excited to win this award with like no context. Like they don't
right,
talk about why it's important or what's happening in the industry. And I think when people are thinking of developing their quote, they have to really think about like what would you really say? Would you say like, "Oh, I'm so excited." Like nobody talks like that. So
right.
that's such a good point. And actually, you had brought up, I think you guys have a great service, and I don't think it's like, as known as like the press release distribution, but you also write press releases, like one-off press releases as well, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we have freelance writers that we use, um, and we pick the writer that is good for the subject. We have a writer that's really good with women's interest type articles and things like that. We have another one who's really good at breaking down technology oriented releases. And so we have a group of writers that we utilize, and we try to match with the person. And it is, at the end of the day, we're trying to find something that's newsworthy or intriguing, or potentially could be intriguing to journalists. And we love when we have a client that's willing to test and try a few different approaches.
Yeah.
We had a carpet company in New Jersey, a local carpet company in New Jersey, that came to us and said, "Oh, I have a budget for PR." And I told them, I said, "I don't think it's going to work for you." And so we did a release or two, and nothing happened. And they said, "Well, we still got more money." And I said, "Well, who's the enemy to you as a local carpet company?" And they said, "It's Home Depot and Lowe's. These big box companies
Oh,
are they're out there, and they're just taking a lot of our business." And so we drafted a release that talked about having to compete against the big box companies like Home Depot and Lowe's, and why they're important and what they do that's different. And they got picked up in every floor and trade publication that I
wow.
could think of. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know that there were that many. They got picked up in over 14 different floor and trading publications because it resonated with that industry. They actually
Right.
also got invited to do a columns for two of the publications, saying, "We want you guys to talk about the local carpet companies and what you're doing, everything from marketing to everything else." And the client said, "We don't have the budget for that," but
Oh, Lord.
it was flattering. But
Yeah.
over the years, what they did, they continue to do releases occasionally, and they have a big book of all their clippings. And they used to compete against Home Depot and Lowe's by trying to be the cheapest.
Yeah.
And so they come into a person's home for a quote, and they say, now we're not going to be the cheapest out there. There are people who do cheaper, but we're a little bit more because we use this padding, we do this. But here we are recognized in the industry, and they just start opening, and floor trading today, floor covering, and
Right.
.com, all of these different trade publications, including their local newspapers, have picked them up. And they say that now I think they win 70% of most bids, and they're not having to come in as the cheapest provider anymore. And that's the sort of credibility opportunities that comes with PR, which I'm sure you're quite aware of.
Yeah.
But that was a client that I told from the beginning, "I don't think this is going to work for you," but they were open to trying and exploring different things. And I put my head on and thought about what we could do to sort of create our news opportunity out there. And it turns out that there was a vacuum in their industry of people not talking about marketing and competing, and how challenging it is to go against the Goliaths in the industry.
That's awesome. Great case study. I love that example. And I like the way you guys kind of, yeah, I mean, a lot of times they know what they want to say, but this is a great way of thinking around the box, not even out of the box, out around it.
Right.
um, okay. So I think we covered a couple of questions that rephrased it a little bit, but why do you think that, well, we kind of answered this question. So let's see. We kind of have gone through the basics of press releases, distribution. Um, Obviously, distribution costs anywhere from like $1,500 and up. And I've had the pleasure of using e-releases for many years. So we usually use the digital distribution. Can you talk about what's different about like a typical, this is, I guess, is a little bit more markety, but typical PR distribution over PR newswire or business wire versus an e-releases digital distribution?
Okay, so our distribution is a custom national distribution over PR Newswire. We originally, I think that we had been working with another wire at the time, and they reached out to us and wanted to work with us. And the the numbers didn't work. I mean, even with a 40 or 50% discount off their services, it was way out of the reach of our customers. And so, they took a snapshot of who our customers were. The average customer is a small business owner who does 2 to 3 releases a year. Their
Right.
salespeople are never going to reach out to these people. They're just not worth the time
Right.
and effort to market to them. And so, I sort of approached it as a small business co-op, that we represent these small businesses, and together we can do a lot of volume, but individually we don't. And so they customized a distribution that's national in nature, so the opportunities are there. Includes all the industry targeting that happens with the newswire, and basically it's an opportunity for a small business to get something that normally they couldn't afford or even come close to. And so that's always sort of been the win-win with us. There has been times that the newswire has wanted us to move to like a web-only type product, like I think they had the iReach and
Yeah,
PR.
yeah. But that's
now
not very,
now
I don't like that one. I don't like that one at
yeah,
all.
and PR Web as well.
Mhm.
And we just didn't feel like the value was there. So we've held firm that we really want to get the distribution over the newswire, because at the end of the day, getting a bunch of links to a syndicated press release on websites, while it looks good and it is something that's immediately available to customers and clients to see after a release has gone out, that the real goal of it is to get an article written about you, and that doesn't always happen. But when it does, it's a great ROI, and a credibility indicator, and something you can add to your arsenal of marketing and things like that. And the clients that I think do the best are those that recognize when they do get media opportunities, to promote that on social media, share that with their customers, share that with their vendors and other providers, and also push that out there, and also put it on their website. Because when you're looking at 2 different companies, if one's been mentioned in Huffington Post and this place and a couple of other places, it's
Mhm.
like I feel a little more comfortable placing my order here. And
Right.
it might even be 5 to 10% more expensive than this unknown company, but there's a credibility that goes here, and that's the value of PR.
Yeah,
Um,
no, absolutely. That's such a great point. Yeah. I think that's, if you missed him saying this, I think it goes bears saying again that make sure when you are doing a press release, you are doing it over your other channels. Like you said, social media, LinkedIn, even reposting on your blog or including it on a newsletter if you have a newsletter. All these things, it's so funny, and I know startups have a problem, and entrepreneurs specifically, with like a lot of self promotion, but if you don't do it yourself, no one's going to do it for you.
that's
So
true. That's true.
so I know that that becomes a little bit of a tough spot sometimes. So I love all the things that you said today. I think they're all very, very useful. Do you have any secret hacks that you'd like to share when talking about press releases?
Well, I think that focusing on the headline, the opening paragraph, if you can put a really captivating quote in there, something that if the quote was removed, there's a loss, and don't make the quote an afterthought. Make sure that if you have relevant photos or images, to include those are becoming more and more important, because a lot of people out there, especially trade publications, are wanting to have images that accompany articles and things like that, because people are very visual. And so make sure you have those images and photos with your release when you send it out. um, a good contact. Sometimes people don't like listing media contacts. We work with a lot of small businesses, a lot
Uh-huh.
of people who are starting side businesses, so they're working a full-time job. They don't
All
want to
right.
be called. So I'm like, even if it's a Google Voice number with a voicemail, have something that you can get alerted to, quickly, because I've had many people get picked up at the last minute, and
Yeah. And
someone's going,
you guys do send the notification if someone inquires, if a
right.
media person inquires with e-releases, you guys do send that notification pretty quickly.
Right, that's correct, because those are a priority, and we want to get those out as quick as possible. And a lot of times when it's a new customer, we also call them and let them know that a
Yes.
journalist has responded, because they don't realize how important this is. You know, they think
Right.
that eventually I'll get to it. And I had one person who did a release, and he called me back a week later and said, "I just called all the people who responded to my release, and
It's
they
too
said it
late.
was too late." And it was in the middle of a hurricane, and he had developed a product that was, he was working with the government to release something almost like soap suds into a
Okay.
hurricane, and supposedly it did something to the viscosity of water and made storms less severe. And it was in the middle of a storm that was approaching, and he actually went uh, in a helicopter and was helping the military try this as a trial. And so he didn't have the time to get back to him. But a week later, the storm was over,
Yeah,
and
nobody cares.
the journalists weren't as interested. And he said, "Oh, Good Morning America,
Oh
Fox, all these people
no.
had called him, and he just wasn't able to respond." And he said, "If I'd thought about it, I could have given them the number to my assistant, and she would have been able to probably, help them 80% of the way. Some of them probably did want to interview live, and the assistant wouldn't have been a good fit for it, but he could have saved perhaps some of those opportunities."
Well,
So
that's
being
another good point. Be
right,
available. Be
yes, yeah,
available.
be available, and uh, be available long term. We have journalists who will go and research old releases
Mhm.
and pick someone that they feel would be someone they could talk to on a subject or matter. And that's worked out really well for a few people in certain industries. Like we had someone who knew biometric industry really, really well, and he started to get quoted all over the place, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. And I ran into him once, and he said, "It was that press release I did like 4 years ago that got me on everyone's radar, and
Mhm.
now when there's a biometric story, they just pick up the phone and call me." And so that's really cool. And if you're in a competitive industry where there's a lot of experts, there's no reason why you putting an occasional press release out there might just sort of jog people's memory and eventually make it to their Rolodex of experts that they can call on.
Yeah, that reminds me, we need to do more press releases as a PR agency too.
It's
I think, PR people are the worst at doing PR for themselves, but I think that's one place where we probably should pick up some. So I'm probably gonna send out a press release sometime soon.
Sounds great.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. I think this has been an amazing conversation. I think a lot of good insights on press releases, why you have to use them, what you should do with them. And then also, if you guys are a new customer, if you want to try out e-releases, you can check out the link. It's ereleases.com/hello, and I'll put it inside the page here so you can have a link to it, but you'll get $100 off your first e-release distribution. And we'll also have a special PR worksheet on press release development. And then if you haven't tuned into it, we have a live workshop happening right about now. So tune into the live workshop on press release development so you can get all the things that you need to draft your next press release. And we are good to go. So thank you so much, Mickie, for joining me today. And I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.